I like to remind you from time to time about Revolt against Plutocracy because that's why this channel got started in the first place. One of the initial tenets of Revolt against Plutocracy was to get big money out of elections. Victor Tiffany, the founder of Revolt against Plutocracy and the OG of the Bernie or Bust movement, knows a lot about the Constitution and about how Supreme Court decisions work with the Constitution. You can go back and watch previous episodes where I've interviewed Victor, and then you'll get a good idea about how he got started in this movement. Since I've been part of Revolt Against Plutocracy, one of our central thrusts has been to scare comfy Dems into voting for progressive candidates. I have to say we've had pretty limited success in that area. Comfy Dems are notorious when it comes to giving up any of their privilege or their sneering, snarling condescension when it comes to the category of people that they would call deplorable. And it's fair to blame them for the fact that we have Joe Biden on the verge of becoming our 46th president. Victor wrote an article on the Revolt Against Plutocracy website that I'm going to share with you now. As always, I'll link to the article in the show notes underneath this video and underneath podcasts where you find them. I have to offer a disclaimer. Our numbers in our committee are smaller than they used to be, and I'm not sure that this applies to everyone. I'd say it's fairer to say that this is Victor's agenda as opposed to our agenda, because I actually have a couple of disagreements with it. RAP stands for Revolt Against Plutocracy. Revolt Against Plutocracy's revolutionary agenda. While we are against plutocracy, a good question to ask is, what are you for? No revolution continues indefinitely. That's the first place I have to stop. Trotsky, Mao, and other revolutionary leaders have said that we need to have a continual revolution, and I'm more of that school. This is from Wikipedia, Continuous Revolution Theory, sometimes also translated as the theory of continuing revolution under the dictatorship of the proletariat. It's an interesting way to think of it, the dictatorship of the proletariat. I kind of like to think that way. It isn't difficult for an anarchist to think about the dictatorship of the proletariat and think, oh, that would be a good thing. So continuous revolution theory is an important element of the thought of Mao Zedong. This is often subsumed under the subject of the Cultural Revolution, but it is worth considering continuous revolution theory in its own right as an independent topic. Continuous revolution theory is rooted in Mao's thoughts regarding the nature of contradiction. He argues that since contradictions within society between revolutionary and reactionary elements, and that would be between true leftists and comfy Dems, or comfy suburbanite Republicans also, can be expected to continue for a long time. Let me start that over. Mao argues that since contradictions within society between revolutionary and reactionary elements can be expected to continue for a long time, it is necessary to work continuously toward the progressive fulfillment of the revolutionary program. As Mao has written, every difference in men's concepts should be regarded as reflecting an objective contradiction. Objective contradictions are in subjective thinking, and this process constitutes the contradictory movement of concepts, pushes forward the development of thought, and ceaselessly solves problems in man's thinking. So it's a dynamic that keeps going into the future, no matter what. The contention that contradiction is inherent to everything is thus taken to suggest that revolution must be continual if it is not to succumb to reactionary forces. And that's also what Trotsky says, and I think that's true. I don't think you can ever get comfortable because the other side, the reactionary side, will always be trying to gain back its territory. That's what happened after World War II. Continuous revolution theory is rooted in this fundamental insight regarding the nature of contradiction. It suggests that a revolution cannot really be over because contradictions will continue to develop such that it is necessary to perpetually resolve emergent contradictions in favor of the revolutionary program while resisting the risk of sliding back into reaction. Now let me jump back to Victor's point. No revolution continues indefinitely, and I'd say that's a mistake. Our revolution will be declared a success when plutocracy has been replaced by a comprehensive campaign finance reform bill signed into law that creates genuine democratic equality, our primary revolutionary demand. As you can see, our disagreement is small and probably even inconsequential because we absolutely agree that we need comprehensive campaign finance reform. It may be a perpetual struggle to even get there. We may never get there. But if we did get there, I think it would be dangerous to just stop and then say, we've made it. So he goes on to say that we need an amendment to the Constitution to overturn Buckley versus Vallejo, Citizens United versus FEC, and McCutcheon versus FEC. So he knows a lot about these Supreme Court decisions. And the second thing we need is comprehensive campaign finance reform. And Victor says, while we do not support economic equality, and I'm not sure if we agree on that, we do believe that political equality is essential for any democratic society. So maybe not economic equality, but political equality. In other words, everyone has an opportunity, and that's a very American way to think. Political equality before the law is not just one person, one vote, but also X amount of dollars maximum per citizen in a given election cycle. This page is intended to explain the value of X and outline our key issue, money in politics. The emergency of runaway global warming has convinced us to set our agenda of comprehensive campaign finance reform on hold for the next election cycle. For more on that, see Green Revolution. I don't know if every former Bernie or Buster feels the way Victor and I do, but we've both decided that the climate crisis should be on the front burner. Talking Points Memo has reported that, according to a poll from the New York Times, some 85% of the American people believe that the way political campaigns are funded needs either fundamental changes, 39%, or a complete rebuild, 46%. Senator Sanders supports public financing of elections. Yeah, we need public financing of elections. While most of the American left agrees with that concept, we believe that there is a better way that the American right also could embrace. Conservatives at the Take Back Our Republic website support a voucher program where Americans would receive a voucher back from the government for the first $200 they pay in income tax. The weakness with that idea is twofold. Number one, Americans who do not make enough to pay $200 in federal income tax would not fully benefit, or they would be left out completely. And the second point is that $200 would deprive the federal government of too much money. If every American citizen qualified to vote had a $50 per year voucher to donate to candidates, PACs and/or political parties, the total amount of money available would be roughly equal to the total spent on all national campaigns in 2012. As we've seen in the last two election cycles, that amount has gone up exponentially. Victor's creative compromise is a synthesis of public financing and a voucher program. Political equality means not just one person per vote, but also one person per X amount of dollars maximum available for political donations. No one should be allowed to give more than X dollars, and the value of X would be determined by compromise in legislation. For Americans who did not make enough to pay X dollars in income or capital gains tax, their voucher should be supplemented or funded by a tax, not on citizens, but on American-based transnational corporations. The profits made by ExxonMobil alone in just the fourth quarter of last year, $6.6 billion, that's a billion with a B, could fund virtually the entire voucher program of all citizens in the United States if X equals $50. Taxing all American-based TNCs, transnational corporations, to fund the vouchers of poor Americans would not amount to a significant tax increase for them. The value of X would have to be updated from election cycle to adjust for inflation. Constitutional amendment? Starting in 1976, the Supreme Court usurped the power of Congress and state legislatures to regulate the manner of holding fair elections. The decision, Buckley versus Vallejo, overturned limits Congress placed on the amount of money candidates could spend on electioneering communications, propaganda. The upshot of that decision was a modification of the First Amendment that equated money with speech. In the 2010 Citizens United decision, that logic was applied to associations, including for-profit American-based transnational corporations. While they already had First Amendment free speech rights, also granted by the court in 1976, Citizens United allowed them to spend unlimited amounts of money helping elect the candidates of their choice. This is not democracy. This is corporatocracy. In McCutcheon versus FEC 2014, the court ruled that giving, not just spending money to candidates for office, is protected by the First Amendment. The campaign finance reform described above to establish political equality would be ruled unconstitutional under current court doctrine established by Buckley, Citizens United, and McCutcheon. Congress can take back the power the court took away from them by passing a constitutional amendment that gives it and state legislatures the power to regulate the volume, not the content, of political speech. To replace our current plutocratic corporate state, either the Constitution must be amended to make clear to legislators and judges that money is not speech and corporations are not people, associations have privileges, not rights, or pass a campaign finance bill to enact political equality for all citizens and invoke the Constitution's exclusion clause in Article 3, Section 2. The framers granted Congress the explicit power to craft legislation and exclude the courts from ruling on it. Taxing the wealthy? The level of wealth and income inequality in this country is obscene. Between 2013 and 2015, the wealthiest 14 Americans saw their wealth increase by $157 billion. That amount is more than is owned by the bottom 128 million Americans. This is a rigged system. The economy must work for all people, not just the 1%. And since COVID, that sucking sound you hear is the sound of even more money going even faster up towards the top few. The upward redistribution of wealth in the U.S. over the last 35 years is primarily a direct consequence of the Reagan tax cuts, so-called Reaganomics or supply-side neoliberal economics. The Reagan Revolution was more like a counter-revolution. The basis of our perspective is captured by Robert Reich's film Inequality for All. Like Reich, we are not Marxists. We support higher incomes for workers through the implementation of a livable wage system and a federal job guarantee. And as you've probably gathered, I'm more of a Marxist than either Victor or Robert. But I've talked a lot to Victor about this, and I'll say that he's not as far right as Elizabeth Warren. He's not trying to put a Band-Aid on capitalism. A constitutional amendment and/or comprehensive campaign finance reform will not happen anytime soon, unless we pile in the streets and demand it tomorrow. That was me. While we struggle for political equality and deploy leverage during campaign seasons, the Revolt Against Plutocracy revolution will support efforts to raise the minimum wage. Higher minimum income is a much higher priority than federal tax increases that are often unpopular and politically impossible to pass. Yeah, I'm in complete agreement about that point. The federal government does not need tax income to function and pay its bills. Right. The Constitution gives Congress the power to coin money, and that's all it needs to either print money or, more often, move numbers around on federal budget spreadsheets. Conservatives should understand this after Vice President Cheney said, "Ronald Reagan taught us deficits do not matter." When a sovereign nation has control of its own currency, and that currency is not tied to anything of value such as gold, those federal governments can always pay their bills. Tax increases take money out of the economy, and there is a lot of extreme wealth. If you doubt that there is more than enough money available to accomplish almost any goal, read David DeGraw's Unprecedented Abundance. Taxing the wealthy is not a priority for us. Solving the problem of plutocracy using comprehensive campaign finance reform was our top priority until soon after the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's most recent report. Saving the mammals supporting climate from collapse has become Revolt Against Plutocracy's job number one for the next election. We hope other groups will unite around this strategy and endorse the climate or bust voting strategy to make the same point. And as I've said many times on this show, the or bust idea isn't just electoral. Not only do we refrain from voting for corporatists and only vote for people we think are actually going to make a difference in the right direction, we also are willing to jump out into the street and protest and withhold our labor in general strikes. To me, that part of the or bust strategy is more potent than merely withholding our votes from corporatists. I'll close by answering some of the questions that I've seen in the comments, particularly where do I find all of my source material? And Victor is a huge part of where my source material comes from. He's always scouring the internet, finding the best articles and videos that he can. He also plugs this show on Facebook and Twitter. Here's an example in the Facebook group Progressives United /USA Politics. The best thing that one human being can say about another, especially if they have any points of disagreement, is that they're operating in good faith. And that is absolutely true of Victor. Every conversation you have with Victor, you know he's operating in good faith. He doesn't have any sneaky agendas. He's absolutely trying to make things better for the American people and for the worldwide population of people. So anytime there are disagreements, they always turn out to be instructive as opposed to destructive. If you have any questions for Victor, I would urge you to get a hold of him on Facebook. He's very accessible, and that would be a boon to your education no matter what. He knows a lot about the Constitution and Supreme Court decisions, and he can put you in touch with all kinds of information if you're a scholar or just somebody who's interested in learning more. And of course, if you have disagreements with me, or you'd like more information, or you have suggestions for future shows, I love interacting with the comments underneath this show. If you're listening on podcast, feel free to get a hold of me on Facebook, Alan Kit Howell, and I will get right back to you, and I will engage your questions there anytime. You can also find me on Twitter at Howell Underground. The links to my Facebook and Twitter accounts are in the show notes underneath.